Chapter 128. Shizun, you can't just wear whatever clothes you feel like. Chu Wanning's heart raced, and he was so mad his face flushed. He could see from the corner of his eye that the man was still standing frozen in the same spot. Despite not looking directly at him, Chu Wanning could feel the man's stare, open and brazen, like a sword raised from a crucible, still hissing with an overwhelming heat that vaporized the curtain of water and pierced right through him. Though he couldn't say why, he felt absolutely scandalized. With an increasingly sour expression, he bit down on his lip and retreated even farther into the waterfall. But it turned out this guy was a moron. As Chu Wanning scrambled backward to hide, the man took a step forward like a puppet on a string. Chu Wanning was furious. There were always a couple of perverts at Jincheng Peak. There had even once been a woman who, instead of going to sleep in her bed like a normal person, had crawled onto the roof of the Red Lotus Pavilion to peep at him bathing. Just thinking about it made his scalp go numb, and gooseflesh rose along the arm that had been grabbed by that guy. Fortunately, after he'd retreated into the waterfall as deep as he could go, inadvertently swallowing more than a few gulps of the water in the process, the man finally decided to leave him be, returning to the streaming water to continue rinsing himself, though he looked back several times. Chu Wanning tamped down his anger the best he could. He was in no mood to soak in the bath anymore. His only thought was to finish up and get out of there as soon as possible. He reached for the towel draped over his shoulder, only to realize that the towel, together with the soap bean bar and fragrance bar wrapped inside, had fallen into the water during his great tumble earlier. They'd probably dissolved away by now. Should he get out to fetch a new one? But he was naked, and getting out would involve walking past that guy. Chu Wanning's face had gone from red to blue. He pressed his thin lips together, mortified. He was not going. Like an idiot, he remained standing with his arms crossed over his chest and his back to the rock, letting the water wash over him in the deepest part of the waterfall. Chu Wanning stood there, silent, unmoving. So did that other man. On the other side of the streaming water, that guy spoke up to ask hesitantly, "Would you like a soap bean bar?" He received no reply. "And a fragrance bar?" Again, no reply. "Surely you're not going to just wash like that?" Staying right where he was, Chu Wanning closed his eyes and replied coldly, "Toss them over then." But the man didn't toss the bars over. Perhaps he thought it would be rude to do so with a stranger. After a short delay, Chu Wanning watched a peach leaf enchanted with spiritual power drift slowly toward him under the waterfall, bearing a soap bean bar and 2 fragrance bars. Chu Wanning picked up the items, but paused upon taking a closer look. The soap bean bar was as it always was, since everyone used basically the same thing, but the stranger had picked out a plum blossom scented fragrance bar and a haitang scented one, Chu Wanning's favorites. He couldn't help but glance at the tall figure in the distance through the sparkling, translucent curtain of water. "Those 2 cents okay?" the man asked. "Fine," Chu Wanning replied. The man said no more, and the two continued their bath in silence within their separate, distant corners, each occupied with his own thoughts. Chu Wanning began to feel a little more at ease as he washed. Cautiously, he stepped back out from the depths of the waterfall. The stream where he was standing was actually a bit too strong for comfort. But the man looked over again the instant he emerged. It would have been one thing if he just looked, but there was something weird in his stare. Chu Wanning got the distinct impression that the man wanted to say something, but was stopping himself, and that he was wavering between coming closer or staying back. His skin prickled all over. Chu Wanning washed for a bit until he finally couldn't take it anymore and decided to leave first. But he had left his clothes at the entrance, and he'd have to go back that way to get dressed. Chu Wanning could do nothing but brace himself as he walked toward the man with his face sullen and teeth gritted. As he waded past the man, not too close, but also not too far, that guy unexpectedly also started to move, pulling up his long hair and shaking the water from his bangs to follow Chu Wanning out of the bath. A vein in Chu Wanning's temple throbbed. He started moving faster, but that man was astoundingly shameless. He started moving faster as well. The vein in Chu Wanning's temple throbbed harder. The tips of his fingers had already begun to glow with the golden light of Tianwen, but he held back from summoning his weapon, not because he was concerned about injuring someone, but solely because he felt that he should get dressed before beating anyone up. He started wading even faster. This time, the man stopped instead of continuing to tail him. Chu Wanning sighed in relief, but had only let out half a breath before he heard the man say from behind him, "There are soap bubbles in your hair." Chu Wanning froze. "Aren't you gonna rinse it off?" Chu Wanning burned with anger. The man approached him slowly, not stopping until he was very close, right behind, where his voice could be clearly heard. If Chu Wanning hadn't been so furious, he would have noticed that the voice was familiar, despite its change in timbre. Unfortunately, he was at present engulfed by the flames of rage. "You." The man seemed to still have something more to say, but Chu Wanning had reached the limits of his forbearance. He whipped around, golden light flashing to life in his palm as he lashed out with an audible whoosh and a dangerous glint in his eyes. Chu Wanning was so enraged that he was tempted to kill this guy and be done with it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Tianwen ripped through the hazy steam, snapping directly toward the other man's chest. For an instant, the golden glow lit his face. Chu Wanning saw a pair of eyes. Clear, gentle, sheepish eyes that seemed to hold flowing rivers of stars, like so many glimmering fireflies on the wind, yet were also tranquil as still, deep waters, veiling bygone things beneath. Moran? He tried to pull back, but it was too late. The willow vine hissed as it struck Moran's firm, glistening chest. Moran only let out a stifled grunt and ducked his head a little. When he looked back up, his eyes held not the slightest trace of anger or resentment, but were a little wet, as if washed by the first rains of Lin An. Chu Wanning recalled Tianwen and stood frozen in place. A long interval passed before he managed a hoarse, "Why didn't you dodge?" Moran replied, "Shizun." Chu Wanning was stunned. He had imagined so many times how the two of them might meet again, but never did he think it would be at Melodic Springs in the hot spring pool. "What are you doing here? When did you get back?" "I just did," Moran replied softly. "I was too dirty and unpresentable from rushing to get here, so I came to take a bath before going to see Shizun. I didn't expect." For a moment, Chu Wanning was speechless. Neither of them had expected something like this to happen. They had both wished for their reunion to be proper and dignified. Moran had probably, at the very least, wanted to appear before Chu Wanning clean and well-dressed. But in the end, not only was their meeting not proper, it was straight-up laughable. Not only was it not dignified, it was absolutely ridiculous. Not only were they not well-dressed, they were both completely naked. They were clean though. So clean, they didn't have a single stitch on. "Shizun, it's really you." Moran, for his part, didn't care much for these things. For 5 years, Chu Wanning had slept, and he had been awake. What had only spanned the length of a dream for Chu Wanning had been more than 1,000 torturous days for him. His frame of mind was far more complicated than Chu Wanning's. Forcing down his surging emotions, the rims of his eyes a little red, he said, "It's been so long that just now, I didn't dare believe my eyes. I thought I might have had the wrong person. I thought, Head ringing, Chu Wanning was at a loss for words. It was a long moment before he said, "Why didn't you just ask me if you weren't sure, instead of silently creeping after me like that?" "I did want to ask," Moran said softly, "but it's been 5 years, and then to suddenly see Shizun right in front of me. I thought I was dreaming." As I approach home, my nervousness grows. I dare not ask even those passing by. Those lines likely described what he felt when he first saw that familiar silhouette. He'd dreamt such dreams too many times in the past 5 years. He was afraid it was more of the same madness, and that he would wake with tear stains on his pillow to find that the reunion he'd seen was just another joyous delusion. Chu Wanning maintained a calm exterior, but his insides were a roiling mess. It was hard work, really, to speak so stiffly and dryly, while his heart felt so soft and gooey. What kind of dream could be this absurd? Moran stilled for a beat at Chu Wanning's response, as if he'd remembered something. He pressed his lips together, and a light flickered in his eyes. He hadn't planned to bring this up the moment they met again, but he realized after some hesitation that if he didn't say it now, while Chu Wanning hadn't yet had a chance to rebuild his walls, he probably wouldn't get another chance. So he said after a pause, "Does Shizun not remember?" "Remember what?" Moran's eyes were deep and dark. "What you said to me before, that the most wonderful dreams are rarely ever true." "That was because..." Chu Wanning caught himself mid-sentence, suddenly recognizing the words he had spoken to Moran at Jincheng Lake as he rescued him from the blood hourglass. Back then, he'd uttered this melancholic sentiment in the depths of his own misery. He was a little surprised Moran remembered it so clearly after all these years. But how did Moran know it had actually been him at Jincheng Lake? Had Shi Mei told him? Chu Wanning lifted his eyes to peek at him and found himself meeting Moran's steady gaze. Only then did he realize that Moran hadn't actually known the truth and had only said it to gauge his reaction. "So it really was Shizun then?" Moran said softly. Chu Wanning kept his mouth shut. Moran raised a hand. His chest had been slashed open and blood seeped from the wound. He smiled wryly. "Over these last few years, I've done a lot of thinking about the past. I wanted to understand just how much Shizun had done for me. I thought back on a lot of things, including the illusion at Jincheng Lake. Shi Mei never calls me by my full name." He paused before continuing. "The more I thought, the more those memories tormented me. There were a lot of things I wanted to ask Shizun about once you woke." Chu Wanning watched him silently. "But the thing I wanted to ask about the most was Shizun, the one who saved me at the bottom of the lake back then. It was you, wasn't it?" Moran stepped closer as he spoke. Chu Wanning wanted to back away. He'd suddenly realized just how tall Moran had become, like a mountain with powerful strength latent in every inch of his body. He'd suddenly realized just how bright Moran's eyes were, like the very sun had fallen into those twin pools, all the colors of dawn splashed across the gleaming waters. Chu Wanning found himself flustered for no reason whatsoever. He said, "It wasn't me." Moran didn't buy it at all. Grasping desperately at straws, Chu Wanning scrambled to change the subject, but he was so startled, so nervous, and so discomfited that he completely forgot about the question he'd already asked and which Moran had already answered. Looking at the bleeding gash he'd inflicted, he asked once more, "Why didn't you dodge when I struck you earlier?" Moran fell silent for a second, then dropped his thick curtains of lashes with a smile, answering once more. "You said that dreams that were too good to be true probably weren't." He paused before continuing at a murmur. "I wanted to see if it would hurt. If it hurts, then it's not a dream. He walked over and stood right in front of Chu Wanning. Maybe it was because of how sudden the reunion had been, but in his heart, the joy and fondness and tenderness and heartbreak overtook all. Moran thought of nothing else, no flights of fancy. He even forgot that he was supposed to maintain a proper distance from Chu Wanning. He'd had every intention of keeping that arm's length of propriety between a disciple and his master. But he didn't. Whenever his emotions ran deep, he'd always think of the person before him as Wanning rather than Shizun. Moran's eyes grew still more red and teary. He lifted an arm with a grin. "I think some water got in my eyes just now," and scrubbed at his face. Chu Wanning stared up at him in a daze. All this time, he'd been anticipating Moran's return, so he was a little more clear-headed than his disciple right now. But that portion of clarity also afforded him the presence of mind to notice their current condition, talking face to face while buck naked. And not only that, Moran was so close that, were he to come just a bit closer, he'd be able to wrap his arms around Chu Wanning the way he had back in the underworld. Chu Wanning didn't want to continue looking up at Moran's unfairly handsome face, but when he dropped his gaze a few inches, the sight that greeted him was one of broad shoulders and a firm chest, the blood from Tianwen's lash spreading slowly, and droplets of water shivering minutely with every breath Moran drew. Chu Wanning couldn't tell which was hotter, that sculpted chest or the water of the hot springs. All he knew was that he was surrounded by Moran's scent, and that it was going to steal away his soul. "Shizun, He what? Before Moran could say any more, Chu Wanning turned on his heel and took off running. Moran was flabbergasted. He was literally running. He'd never seen Chu Wanning fleeing like this, running away like whatever was behind him was gonna eat him alive and chew up his soul. "I've really missed you so much." Moran finished limply. He stood where he was, pursing his lips. What had he run away for? He felt a little wronged. When he got out of the pool and spied Chu Wanning, whose face alternated between hues of red and blue as he scrambled frantically to get dressed, he felt even more wronged. "Shizun," he mumbled. Chu Wanning ignored him. "Shizun." Chu Wanning continued to ignore him while wrapping the belt sash around his waist. "Shizun." "What?" Dressed at long last, Chu Wanning finally let out a breath. He felt his dignity and composure return to his body, now that it was covered. His sword-straight brows slanted in anger, and his stern phoenix eyes glared fiercely at a traitorous disciple who dared exceed him in height. "What's so important that you can't wait till we're outside to say it? Talking to me naked like that. Have you no shame?" A little chagrined, Moran raised a fist to his lips and cleared his throat. "It's not like I want to be naked." "Then why aren't you getting dressed?" Moran paused, fixing his gaze on the peach tree near the side of the pool as he began. "So, it's like this." He took a deep breath, then finally steeled himself to say, "Shizun, those are my clothes you're wearing." A faint blush spread across Moran's cheeks as he stared intently at a branch of peach blossoms swaying in the gentle breeze.